Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. Tom Hazard here, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And Bill, I have to tell you, I am fired up. I have to tell you, there is so much that is going on in the last 5 days since, you and I last spoke and recorded our previous episode. And oh my gosh, this is going to be a fun episode. I want to just acknowledge to our listeners that at the last episode, we talked about how we would talk about perhaps missed opportunities and messaging that, could have helped the Democrats make their case for impeachment stronger and could have helped the Republicans defend the president, maybe staying closer to integrity. And maybe that will show up in this episode, or maybe we'll end up saving that for another time. I'm not sure, because it is just amazing to me how many things are showing up in our political discourse and, the process of impeachment, where the hearings have wrapped up, and everybody who's talking to anyone in the media, that all the different things that we have talked about in this podcast, and that actually we set up in the very first episode of the truth scale.
Yep.
And let's remind our listeners, the truth scale, we'll go through it again here today, but their truth scale has all these 7 different levels of illusion, I guess, but what it is getting further away from truth the further you get down the list, and they're all showing up right now.
They are, yeah. And the big thing, Tom, to really kind of throw our arms around, or our mindset around, is that human beings in our complexity have looked for ways to explain or understand our world, as well as different ways to storytell, create enthusiasm, to create engagement, in our world by the use of language. And because of that, we've done a better job as human beings creating a wonderful life through fiction, that we don't have to go through something. We can just read about something and let somebody else have the pain, and we get to enjoy watching them suffer a little bit over there through fiction. The only challenge is that truth can be hijacked, and the collapsing between what the truth is that's happening and what the illusion or what the fiction is being created. Now they're calling it an alternative narrative. That's the way they're calling illusion. This is an alternative narrative. Can be utilized. And we use language then to try to make a point or create a belief, or get somebody to have investment in agreement with something that might not be true, even though we know it might be true. So this whole levels of truth thing that we did early on in our episodes is going to be handy now as we look through the filter of impeachment, as well as through the filter of the elections that are coming up, and what the candidates say or do. And how do you find the truth is that you start sniffing out that, wait a minute, what that person is doing is not in alignment with what's close to truth. It's more in alignment with an illusion that the person is creating. So does that make some sense? Because that is part of it.
It does make some sense, and I want to make sure we use some recent examples to really illuminate the different levels of truth on the truth scale.
Awesome.
And because let's take sort of the baseline thing. I mean, the let me restate that. It seems that perhaps the public impeachment hearings are over, at least for now. I mean, I think there's
For
still the
now.
possibility another, person may be um, subpoenaed or come in based on a subpoena that already went out. We'll see. The courts are working through some things, but the people that did testify so far are on the scale of truth closest to truth because they actually observed things that happened in
Yes.
with regard to the president and Ukraine, whether they were at a lunch and heard the president on the telephone,
Yes.
or they, spoke directly with Rudy Giuliani and, whatever. I mean, there's so many of these, or who was it? Fiona Hill, who was in a
Fiona Hill, for
meeting
sure. Yeah.
with John Bolton and Sondland and all this, where things
Yes.
actually happened and they witnessed things firsthand. And that's what they testified about. So that's observation, is it not?
It is observation. It's right in the place of both observation and, as the testimonies brought out, is a little more of the evaluation to get clearer on the observation. Fiona Hill did a wonderful job of just taking a broader perspective and saying the following sentence. Well, what I now realize from the testimony yesterday, see, it became aware to her. She knew that there was something going on, and she said, well, what we were doing is State Department and following the rules. What they were doing is doing a political errand.
And that they diverged.
That
Yeah.
they've diverged, and that's why we're sitting here today, because it's all blown up. And I'm really appreciative of John Bolton telling me to go to get legal support here, because otherwise I'm going to get stuck in the middle of things. So I bolted from my job because I was going to get caught as complicit to this stuff that's going on over here. And the attorney told me to, she didn't say this, but my advice was get out now so that you can come back later and get back to the version of truth. Because observation is literally the fact in three different categories. Now, these categories are really important. It's what did the person say? What did the person do? Or, this is weird, but a thought can be an observation.
Hmm.
So I can have a thought about something. It doesn't mean it's true, but it's the closest to truth I can get, because it's the thought or my perception of the world.
So might that thought be like the example that was used a lot in some of the hearings? While you didn't hear the president say, withhold the aid until I get the meetings with Biden, you were saying 2 + 2 = 4. You were thinking and using your brain that this evidence and this evidence, the only possible result is this.
Yes. Well, so what they're doing is that with that narrative is they're dragging it away from observation, sticking a different observation next to it, and try to nudge it down to either the second step, which is evaluation, or the third step, which is judgment. I am judging you. Your observation is not being real. It's like this, Tom, is like if you're looking at a wall, if I look at the back of your wall on your screen and I say, Tom, that's yellow. And you would say, oh, yellow. Well, when I bought it, it said it was Glidden, desert sunset. It's not
Yeah,
yellow. It's Glidden. It's desert sunset. It's not yellow.
right.
Tom, it's yellow. No, your view is it's yellow. My view is it's desert sunset.
Sure. So it's perspective.
Perspective is shift. Now, if we put a third person in the room, they might evaluate. Well, you know what? Listen, you guys, I think it's yellow, but I hear that you're saying it's thing, but I think it's not that. It's bare desert sunrise, or what is a sunset? What is it? It's like what the heck are we talking about? Isn't it yellow? The answer is, well, I don't know what can it came out of. Now watch how weird this gets. I don't know if it was Russian meddling or Ukraine meddling. Just see how
yes.
see how
And
that
so,
worked.
yeah. And so that's the other one that's shown up very recently. One of these things that, you and I were ranting about before we turned on the record button here today, which is that, you know, many Republicans, one that comes to mind is Senator Kennedy, especially on the Sunday talk shows, is saying, well, it might have been, the
Ukraine.
Russians, but it might have been Ukraine, or that it was Ukraine also, or, basically continuing to throw in this doubt that it was the Russians when our own intelligence communities have said definitively, and Robert Mueller said definitively, it was the Russians. And we heard Fiona Hill in her testimony say it was the Russians from her experience as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And this is a disinformation campaign to try to distract everyone and
yeah,
cast a
yeah,
cloud of doubt over Ukraine.
yeah. And one of the things that um, this kind of narrative of separate gets to be, these are the bad people, these are the good people. We're the good people. You're on the good team. You have to vote for me because this is the good team. That team, bad team. Those jobs, bad jobs. I have good jobs, much better than those bad jobs that you already have that are available. We want good jobs. Right. So, um, being sold in a very black and white, judgmental style language, the truth doesn't even get close because we're not evaluating or what it takes to create the good jobs. We're not observing the money or the items that need to be in place in order to secure those good jobs, or the training to be able to do those good jobs. Because you know what? The United States has a lot of good jobs that are available, but right now our population does not have the talent to fill those jobs. So we have to go overseas and take their talent and bring them in to do the skill, to do those skill jobs. So we're plucking talent from all these different nations because our population is stuck down low, being kept there because of economics, and not able to come up and move up into those higher paying skilled jobs because the training and the education system and the industries have moved so quickly that we're behind where other countries are like way ahead of this one. So we're able to pluck, talent from other nations. So, but the politician that says we're going to create good jobs, not like the bad jobs that we have, good jobs, is not talking about the fact at all and the truth at all about what does it take to fill a talented job with a talented person, because there's just
Well,
not available.
it's really an education piece that they're ignoring,
That's
right?
correct. That's right. That's right.
Right, and an opportunity piece and a cost of education. And there's lots of things there. Let's take another thing that showed up here in the last 24 hours, and that is President Trump calling into Fox and Friends. I think this is just yesterday from when we're recording this. And he rants for an hour, has a discussion, if you want to put it nicely, with the hosts there. And this thing shows up, and I want to see where it is on the truth scale. Okay, is that he made the statement that the election meddling in 2016, the hacking of Democratic emails, happened by this company CrowdStrike in Ukraine, which he first of all he called a Ukrainian company, which I've since learned it's not; it's an American company. But he's calling it a Ukraine company, and that CrowdStrike did it. And you could see one of the hosts on Fox and Friends tried to give the president an off ramp and allow him to gracefully,
Correct.
backtrack, and said, "Mr. President, are you sure that that's what happened?" And then this statement shows up. well, that's what we're hearing,
Yes.
or that's what they're saying.
Yes.
And we're like, who's saying it? I mean, how far away from truth is this on the scale?
That's correct. So now all of a sudden we're into labels and diagnoses, we're into criticism, we're into blaming, we're into shaming. So there's a scale of thing. And Tom, maybe if I put this scale up and we could talk through it a little bit. And
Let's do that. That's great.
okay. So
Yeah,
let me
those of you listening to the podcast, you may want to go check out the blog post at purchasingtruth.com and watch the video, or there's also going to be this slide in the blog post.
Okay, so let me move my camera around so I could talk at you at the same time as I could go through the sheet. So truths at the top, and this little chart that I designed called levels of truth is the closest you can get is the position called the observer, where what is being said or done, or sometimes thoughts, have a truth to them. Tom, your wall is yellow, but it might not be accurate. See, my observation might not be accurate because I don't know the lighting you have. It actually might be a washed out orange. I can't really fully see because I don't really know. Or guess what? I might be color blind. Again, I'm making an observations, but I can't see greens and reds. It's like,
but,
it's like,
but it's important to note on the scale of truth, observation is the closest that
it's the
you can get
closest.
to truth. And I know there are perspectives and observations can be
False.
skewed and
Yeah.
false. And we talked about that in another earlier episode with
Yeah.
truth perspective. But
Yes.
this is the closest you can be. So
Yes. Yeah.
it's to I mean, it deserves a certain amount
Yeah.
of respect and attention, does it not?
It does because we're walking across a desert and we see a mirage. We walk across a desert and we see the wavy stuff. Oh, there's water over there. No, there's not water over there. It's the heat coming off the ground and it's reflecting against the light and it kind of looks like it's water. So all of a
Right.
sudden, if we pursue that, as soon as the sun goes down or changes its position, it evaporates. Well, it actually didn't evaporate because it was never there to begin with. Okay. So, so, so the evaluation is the next step away. This is where good litigators play the best. If they stay in observation and evaluation and they keep nailing this, here's what the observation, this is what the person said, this is what the person did, this is the thought that caused us to think this way. These are the thoughts that we're drawing together in order to make this thing. And from that, you're left with an evaluation. The person did the thing or did not do the thing. And then they're going to follow the letter of the law and follow what the letter of the ethics are or what integrity looks like. So when somebody gets on TV and they promote a narrative that is not in alignment with truth, and they spin it from the place of evaluation, like Senator Kennedy did, I believe. He had to walk it back because he was briefed in the last 3 4 weeks by our intelligence services. Yet he still propagated the idea. See, propagating the idea into the position of the observation, well, we really don't know. None of us can really tell because the person is saying, I, the observer, am evaluating this truth. Take my word on it because I'm the observer. It's like the senator holding a snowball in the Senate floor.
Yeah.
He's the observer of truth. There's a snowball outside. Global warming is not taking place. It's like, no, you have a snowball. It's melting in your hand. And that's called weather. That's not called climate. See, climate is the observation position. Well, you see how it gets.
Well, there's a couple different observations, really. He's saying, hey, there's snow. It's cold outside. This global warming thing is a sham.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And right. He drags it down to judgment. Thank you, Tom. He drags it down to judgment. But what they're doing is they're trying to occupy the first position and trying to, purchase truth or hijack truth in the direction, because if I muddy up the front end of this, then it gives a lot room for the illusion or the back end of this chart to take place. Does that make some sense?
It does. It does. It does.
And then you just go into labels and diagnoses. These are boxed words or concepts.
So where does Lindsey Graham's recent statements fall on the truth scale, where he's saying, I'm not even reading the transcripts of these hearings. I'm not even watching these impeachment hearings live because it's a flawed process. And, he's basically checking out of the whole thing and is not doing what would seem to be his duty to evaluate all the firsthand evidence if he's going to be a juror of this trial in the Senate.
Yeah.
Where does that fall on the truth scale?
Well, what he's doing, regrettably, is he's only picking one form of observation, his thought or his belief about something, and then promoting that. It's sort of like somebody that believes that the world is flat and saying the world's flat because that's the way I see it, unless I go into outer space and see the world is round. And there's even been a quote by somebody that was a flat earth. Oh, there's many members of us all across the globe. Wait a minute, you just called it a globe. If you don't think it's flat, it's not a globe. So it's not a globe, but you just called it a globe. Oh, well, I guess I did. No, it's so the flat earth. Okay, so the point of this thing is that thoughts in America get to be true. Freedom of speech gets you to talk about your thoughts. That's what it does.
Okay.
The only problem with that is that when a person has a thought and then they codify it and say it's the only truth, because when they get to the judgment stage, they don't want to talk about it's the only kind of certainty they have in their world, changing very, very, very fast. We're getting different worldviews and different beliefs that are being set in place that are affecting all the various different systems that have been in place for a long time. I mean, all the religious groups are struggling in various different ways because the truth that was captured and kept inside the box is now going like, well, gosh, if Jesus was Middle Eastern, then he probably wasn't white. He probably kind of looked a little different. Oh, he was an immigrant that was looking for a hotel room. It's like, you see what happens is that you and I get to move to the humor place because we're broadening our observational piece and going like, let's put some perspective around this observation, not just saying this one sentence, Tom, your wall is yellow, is the truth. No, it has a bunch of different variations. As a healthy adult knows how to bounce between 1 and 2 on this chart. I observe this, I evaluate it. Now, the healthy piece in here, as soon as you get to those two, instead of putting judgment in, the thing that becomes healthy that keeps you from going to illusion is to start the discussion about what value you're talking from. Between number 2 and number 3, the insertion of empathy or a needs-based narrative keeps you from going into 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And when somebody is in 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you can drag their butt back up. So if I was Joe Biden, I would say this: gosh, I feel sad and disheartened when I hear Lindsey talk. It really doesn't meet my need for friendship when he talks about this in his way, because my belief is he knows me and he knows my integrity. And the two of us have had mutual respect between the two of us in the past. And for him to bring this to my family this thing that's not true just to support his party and his reelection, it doesn't meet the need for integrity, and it's most certainly not in the best interests of America. Tom, do I have my Biden news clip now that gets to be promoted as a leader, as an adult leader?
Yeah, you do. Unfortunately, Joe Biden's not doing anything in the neighborhood of that.
Can you imagine if he just had a little bit of communication like I've given you and provided you some support to go like, you may want to talk about integrity, respect, and protection of America as the person that wants to lead that thing. Now, whether Tom Steyer is going to get on message yet or Bloomberg is going to get on message, they're at least a little cleaner than the other guys that are waffling in sticking with a value that for Bernie, it's going to be healthcare and education. And Elizabeth Warren is going to be pay your fair share in taxes, and some of those other things. Some of the other ones, Klobuchar and Buttigieg are going to try to nudge, and hopefully Biden falls and they get to slip into the moderate piece, but the outsiders are looking a little bit cleaner from a adult narrative, and Bloomberg needs to clean up his stop and frisk. He says,
well, he's already tried to do that. He's apologized for it.
for
At least he's, that's a big step. The president would never apologize for something like that.
Nope.
He would spin that and try to say that, he was right and that it isn't what you all think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the challenge is that when a person does not move back to the place of observation, you get a president that literally is bouncing between 3 and 7 on this chart. That's what his narration was on the Fox and Friends almost hour-long monologue. Criticism, blame, shame, label, judgment, criticism, label, blame, judgment, shame. He's staying all away from truth. I'm going to say this so it's so unsettling. It's say so, and Bill Moyers put a word to this, which was solipsis. It's the world is centered around me. It's a psychological construct. Trump's world is all centered around 3 through 7. It's all centered around that. He'll just to get his needs met ahead of the needs of others, and most certainly the needs of the nation. So, he is playing and utilizing the land of illusion and media, as well as, and Russia's done this to keep all of their people captive, and other nations and other strongmen have used these similar tactics down here on the chart to keep their people intact in place. If you keep people arguing between 3 and 7, you get to sneak away and do whatever you want to do in position number 1 and 2, and give tax breaks, allow a second or third plane to be a tax break. still chuckling about that. Oh, get a private plane. You get to write the whole thing off. Oh, you get to depreciate it over a long period of time. Anyways, so very, 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 very troublesome, very, very troublesome, because because in the position, if I get people arguing between in a disinformation campaign between 3 and 7, I've won. I've really won. So.
Well, yeah. Well, the one of the best examples right now is Trump saying the Ukraine call with Zelensky was perfect. He's labeled it as perfect.
Perfect.
And so then people are, even though he says right there in the call that he wants you to investigate the Bidens if he's going to do these other things for you. And it's right there in black and white written out. He's saying the call was perfect. And so and he says it repeatedly and so much that half of the country, that's all they hear and think.
Yeah, if somebody were to stare it down and have an adult narrative and say, gosh, I guess the president from his beliefs are that the call was perfect. I guess it might have been perfect in the business world to do a deal like this. It seems like in the business world, in the private sector, it's doing that. Regrettably, in the political world, this is outside the rule of law. Notice I just separated it. And there hasn't been one narrative that has been close to that.
Bill, where have you been? My gosh, you need to be on these panels. You need to be where these people are talking about this, because nobody does this. It's all perspective. My perspective, your perspective, left perspective, right perspective. There's never any real, I don't know, what
Yeah.
do you call what you just did there? I mean, it was empathetic, but it also was
Yeah.
separating the issues. You were not letting the truth be hijacked by the
Yeah.
statement the call was perfect. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. You're staying out of that box.
Yeah. The first thing I did was honor the person's thought. I honored the person's thought. I didn't fight the person's thought. I honored it. Gosh, you might have the thought that the Ukraine people were on the side of Hillary and they did it first so that it gave permission for Russia to do it second. Oh, you have the thought that because the Republicans started the Steele dossier first and then it shifted to the Democrats, that it's okay because once the Democrats took it over, they were bad. And it's okay because the Republicans let it go. They were good. No, they let it go because they had to figure out what bed they were getting in. And it looked like Trump was going to win. And they were struggling because they don't want to go further down that rabbit hole, because guess what? The truth is a little bit messy. Somebody said or did something and you have to dig for the truth, and truth is a lot harder to fight for than a judgment is. It's easier for the brain to say, call something right or wrong and be done with it, rather than saying, here's what the truth is, and here's what the cost is, and here's what the reconciliation is. Very hard to do. Very hard to do. I mean, the pardoning of Nixon that was done, which we might run into here pretty soon.
I wonder.
The pardoning of Nixon that was done in the attempt to heal the nation. But what wound up happening is bitterment and resentment showed up for the Democrats, and the Republicans went to scorch earth after that, because as soon as they just look for the next charismatic talking piece, what they get, Reagan. That's what they got.
Yeah.
So very unsettling, because they're, you got to tear, and then they came back and they just went and took over all the different systems that they wanted more freedom around, which is freedom to say what we want, freedom to tax the way they want. This is and not look at the numbers. I mean, even Bush 2 had to get in the same, Bush 1 had to get in the same boat as Reagan. He was debating Reagan and he said, that is voodoo economics. And he was right to call trickle down voodoo economics, because it's voodoo economics. It's like sticking pins in stuff and hoping something shows up. And meanwhile, all you're doing is just putting holes in democracy and putting holes in weakening capitalism by not keeping the middle class alive. Everybody doesn't want to be rich. but everybody wants to get a sense that they're getting ahead and their kids are getting ahead. They want to go there. They don't want to be.
They just need the impression of increase. It doesn't have to be the richest person in the world or the top 1% or even top 10%, but the impression of increase,
Right.
continuing to move in that direction, and of course the need for safety and security, other things like that are critical.
That's correct. That's correct.
But
yep. So it's interesting for us to keep going down this rabbit hole, and a very valuable rabbit hole of truth, because and creating this truth perspective and understanding the levels of truth perspective, so that what happens is this blaming and shaming narrative that the congressmen are using is just so disheartening. And it's so disheartening because the level of disconnect, shows up in such a way that it drags everybody into the illusionary state. And it becomes very, very, very challenging. So,
well, and then it really, the very name illusion or illusionary state, it means fiction. It means it's further away from the truth. But that, it seems, is all that anybody is talking about are
yes.
these illusions, the misdirection, the distractions.
Yeah.
And again, we've talked in the past a little bit about, party over country,
Yeah.
and that is disheartening.
It is the party over country piece. The challenge, Tom, is that when you get into this criticism, blame, shame narrative, my way is right, you should have known, what was wrong with you for not knowing? That's a blame narrative. Let me do 5. Number 5, let me do it for the listeners. Number 3 is judgment, right and wrong thinking, black and white thinking. Number 4, labels and diagnoses. This puts a person in a box by a word or a concept, and it's not truthful, because somebody that is suffering from a diagnosis is not all of that diagnosis. They are suffering, and we have some identifiable features, but it doesn't mean that they can't come out of that box and let the entire label go.
Although this is where the president lives. This is like home base for him.
Home base, labels, diagnosis. I am going to label Nancy a certain thing. I'm going to call, Pete this. I'm going to call Pocahontas this, whatever. So he's going to label and diagnose, puts them in the box, and watch them try to fight out of the box. Now, the best way to do it for Elizabeth Warren would just to claim it. Gosh,
yeah,
I am so glad that President Trump can honor women, especially Native American women, who did such a good job of helping white people find their way in this new nation. Isn't it wonderful how women really lead white men around? Oh my gosh, just claim it.
Yeah, so many things you could do. And I remember, when, and I've seen Trump again recently call Mayor Pete Buttigieg Alfred E. Newman again. He's been bringing that one back up as Mayor Pete's getting more traction in
That's
Iowa.
correct.
And I still think, Pete Buttigieg handled that very well when he, heard that label and said, well, it's nice to see the president making a literary reference.
Right. It's right. It's like, of course, it's a comic book, which is, it's like,
and it's, third grade, fourth grade level reading. But
gosh,
hey,
yeah. Gosh, I'm really glad he was able to be able to read that, thing. So, and criticism number 5, my way is right, you should have known. Trump uses this often. My way is right, you should know. And blame, my way is right, you should have known. And what's wrong with you for not knowing that my way was right? Shame, I must be a bad person for not knowing, mind reading, that you were the authority and I am the subject. And that's where we get into and Tom, we've got so much to do. I can't wait for our next episode, because we could literally take this slide out and just run it up down the scale of, hey, look at what they did. And just honestly, I don't know about you, after this narrative, I actually feel better. I feel hopeful, because once you see it laid out like this, you're going like, I feel hopeful. Oh, are they in the position of observation? No. What did the person say or do? The position of evaluation. Well, it could be yellow, but it could be, desert sunrise. Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, there might be some difference there. And, oh, it could be, well, the right answer is, and, oh yeah, we took it out of the can and this is what it looks like. And you see,
Yeah, I mean, I feel better too going through this, Bill. I really do. But at the same time, the country needs awareness. More people need awareness of the truth scale,
yes,
and our the media
yes,
who are trying to fact check everybody and interview people and get at the facts
they're getting hammered.
need some skill in
Yeah,
how to separate these different levels of truth
that's correct.
from the real truth. I
The,
think
the,
that's what it is, isn't it?
that's correct. That's correct. So,
And
yeah, that's correct. That's the thing. So like, for example, like, just getting on with it, and Anderson Cooper, keeping them straight, keeping them honest, right? Jake Tapper getting caught in the rabbit holes again. It's like,
right,
you cannot set enough mouse traps, rat traps, raccoon traps, bear traps to catch somebody with a fact. You cannot set enough traps. All you get stuck in is a floor that has a bunch of traps on it that you have to walk through, because you're arguing from the place of judgments, labels, criticism, blame. They've drug you, and all of a sudden you're trying to put all these traps to say, I got you. Like, the got you moment is going to get you. I mean, even Trump's got you moment is not a gotcha moment. Hey, what I think the Ukrainians should do is they should start the investigations on the Bidens. It's like, did he just confess on air? I think I just heard him confess on air, and he did.
well, he
And
did, but then he tries to say, well, it's because of corruption. It's because of corruption, when really it was just because of the Bidens and trying to help himself
there's no
with
evidence.
2020.
There's no evidence of that. It was, I'm a great fighter of corruption, other than I have an attorney that used to fight corruption in the distant past and was an advocate for corruption, but now, because they're lost in their own mind, because Juliana is in his own, solipsis, he's in his own radius of the way he think the world is. It's like,
Right.
you can't. And once one of those guys get into a position of authority and you can't get them, and they become a little bit untouchable, which attorneys can tend to do. They get into this little untouchable.
Well, especially if you have the support of the president of the United States.
Yeah, and then you've got Barr sitting there with a little bit. He's untouchable, and he's got his own solipsis going of his own belief structure, and they're all playing off of each other in their own little universe. And we have to go along in the orbits of their narrative. It's really disheartening, and people get caught up in it. There's a lot of gravity when you get to the top like that, because
Yeah.
who else you going to look to? Going to look to, some of these folks, and it's creating great disruption, for our planet. And we have to see how we're going to reclaim truth moving forward.
Boy, well, let's definitely keep the truth, this levels of truth in mind as we observe what unfolds here in coming weeks.
All right. Wonderful.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate this.
Until next time, we'll take some of these things out and we'll put it through the political filter next time, about how Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg and Biden and Bernie Sanders could really take a look at some of the things they do. Once you call Trump a liar, he has you. Can't call him a liar.
Right.
You got to say, here's what the president is observing. I am not observing that. and it's not close to truth. And I have all of this evidence over here to kind of show that it's not. And even though he's on your side, he's not. But I got to show that.
All right.
Anyway. All right,
Sounds
Tom.
good, Bill.
More
Thank
to come.
you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.